Welcome to Hack the Entrepreneur, the show which reveals the fears, habits, and inner battles behind big-name entrepreneurs and those on their way to joining them. Now here is your host, John Naster.
Welcome back to Hack the Entrepreneur. I'm so glad you decided to join me today. I'm your host, John Naster, but you can call me Johnny. My guest for today wasn't always an entrepreneur. In fact, he attended Harvard and worked in investment banking at Goldman Sachs. He did policy work for the National Economic Council at the White House and political organizing for the Service Employees International Union. But then he gave it all up and became an entrepreneur. He is now the CEO and co-founder of Mike, a leading news and media company for young people. Each month, more than 20 million readers rely on Mike's unique sensibility to stay informed and make sense of the world. My guest was also named to the 2014 Forbes 30 Under 30 list. Now, let's hack Chris Altchek. Does your website stress you out? From choosing the right hosting package to finding and updating plugins and themes, there's a lot to think about. When all you really want is a website that is fast, secure, and looks freaking awesome, right? I want to introduce you to StudioPress Sites, the answer to all of your website headaches. StudioPress Sites is a proven solution that gives you the ease of an all-in-one website builder, but with the flexible power of WordPress. It's perfect for bloggers, podcasters, affiliate marketers, and digital entrepreneurs, as well as those selling physical products, digital downloads. With StudioPress Sites, you have hosting, themes, plugins, and SEO tools all in one place. Sign up for StudioPress Sites and you'll be set up in minutes without the hassle of installing WordPress, buying a theme, or sorting out the best plugins. Plus, included security and maintenance features that keep you and your site safe. It's designed to be easy and hassle-free, and yet you can rest assured that if something does go off the rails, the friendly StudioPress support team is standing by 24/7 to assist you in getting back on track. If you're ready to see for yourself why over 200,000 website owners trust StudioPress, the industry standard for premium WordPress themes and plugins, just go to studiopress.com/hack. And as a Hack the Entrepreneur listener, you're going to get your first month absolutely free. Once again, that's studiopress.com/hack. Welcome back to another episode of Hack the Entrepreneur. And we have another brilliant entrepreneur today. Chris, welcome to the show.
Thanks for having me, John.
Absolutely my pleasure, Chris. Absolutely my pleasure. So let's jump straight into it, shall we?
Let's do it.
Chris, as an entrepreneur, what is the one thing that you do that you feel has been the biggest contributor to your successes so far?
That's a tough one. I would say the best, or the thing that's been most important to our success so far and to my success, it actually has evolved over the course of the life of Mike. And so the thing I was doing best probably the first 2 years has now evolved very differently in the second 2 years of Mike. But in the very beginning, the thing we did the best was actually solve a problem that we were really passionate about. Starting a company is incredibly challenging in a very good way, but there's more obstacles and more roadblocks than you'll ever imagine before you start. And if you're not super passionate about the problem you're solving, you're likely going to hit a wall and fall down instead of run through it. And so there's actually, we've had some pretty awesome, epic stories, especially in the beginning. So when we started Mike, I was working in finance before. My co-founder, who I know from high school, Jake Horowitz, was working at change.org. And this was in 2011. Media was not very sexy as an industry. And so we decided to quit our jobs, start a media company focused on creating smart, interesting, informative stories for young people. We talked about it as the CNN New York Times for the next generation. That was our pitch. And we quit our jobs and quickly realized that investors were not very interested in a smart media company for young people that was digitally first. They they were skeptical that online advertising would ever become meaningful enough to support a really expensive content company. And so we couldn't raise money from the beginning. And so we moved into an apartment in Harlem on 127th and Lenox, and every day would work out of this apartment together with our couple first employees, make some coffee, start working. We were all in the kitchen together. And I remember this sort of vividly. We were sitting on the couch one night looking at the analytics, and, we had just crossed our first day where we reached 2,000 people. It was the first day we reached 2,000 people. And we sort of ran some math. This was like a month in. We ran some math and realized that we were going to need to reach 2 million people a day if Mike was going to be successful or sort of successful. And we were looking at 2,000 people. I'm like, oh man, how are we going to grow this 100,000 times? So we were looking at, a pretty daunting challenge from the beginning. And it was really like our passion for building something that we actually believe should exist and could exist that, made us persevere through, I wouldn't say like crazy hard times, but times where we could have definitely packed it up and quit. So I think in the beginning, it's all about picking something that you're very passionate about. For the last 2 years, though, as the company's gone from, we started last year at 15 people, we ended last year at 50 people, we're now at 65. For the last 2 years, it actually gets a little bit simpler, and it becomes a lot, mostly about raising money, making money, and hiring really, really good people. And, your job sort of very quickly goes from doing a little bit of everything or doing all of everything to doing a very limited subset of things, but having to do them really, really well. And as sort of CEO, that subset for me has become worry about the money. So raise money or drive revenue and hire really, really good people. And that skill set is very different than the initial skill set and is super challenging.
Yeah, that's a lot. I'm wondering so I mean, obviously when you started, there was just a couple of employees and your co-founder, Jake, and you had to do, like you said, kind of a little bit of everything. You were probably officially on paper a CEO at that point, but of a very small group of people. Then you went from 15 to 50, now to 65 people. During that process, what was one of the first things that either your co-founder or yourself was like, as soon as you could, it was like, hey, Chris, you can't do that anymore because you're just not that good at it. We have to get somebody to replace you for that part and move you to something where you can obviously provide more value?
Well, there's a lot of things that I'm not good at. So that's a long list. I think it's hard to point out or pinpoint one thing. But if I had to pinpoint a few things, I mean, I was alternating every day writing our newsletter, which was an editorial summary of what was happening in the world, at 5:30 a.m. with my co-founder for the first year. When you think about it, it's like I was writing the newsletter and then running financing processes and running tech and doing all these things. And so that was a little bit crazy. So getting me fully out of editorial was the first thing. I'm not a very good writer. So that was very important to happen very quickly. And we've since replaced, now we've got a 39-person editorial team with some really amazing people. And thankfully for them, they don't ever have to read anything I write. I would say the second thing that I didn't hand off fast enough was running product. And, you'll see a lot of CEOs hold on to product for a long time. And, those are some of the best product companies are driven by really product-driven CEOs. I probably held on to product too long at Mike. And the reason I say that is because while I care a lot about product, much more of a analytics and numbers person and much less of a truly forward-thinking product person. And so I think I thought I was more than I actually was. And since we found a really talented VP of product, I can still inform our roadmap based on the numbers, but he's got, a much deeper sense of what users actually want. And that's been hugely valuable to us. So I'd say those are the two of the big lessons. And, what you realize pretty quickly on is your job as CEO is to replace yourself in all these functions as quickly as possible. And I think most of the time, I didn't learn that lesson fast enough, but your job is to really hire leaders, empower them, build them up, and build a process where they can get your feedback and or suggestions on things, but where they're the true owners of the different pieces of the company. And I think that was something that I figured out, but I figured it out way too late.
Yeah, I think that's very true. And I like how you've you're aware of it now, that your job is to replace yourself, and that you might have done it too late, but it's not even all CEOs at your point are even aware of that at this point. So it's really, really impressive in that way. But let's go back just to the the spark of the idea for creating a media company like a CNN, but for millennials. It's massive. It's a huge, massive undertaking, right? You're fairly recently out of school. You had a job for, I believe, about a year. And you and Jake sit down, and was there ever a time from the idea that we should create this massive media company that kind of changes the way news is, given out to a younger generation? And was there ever a time where you're just like, we should try something smaller? Or what's the mindset that it takes to just be like, no, we can do this. This is something we should definitely do.
Yeah. So that's a great question. So I think, there's a few things. One is the founding story. I'll tell you that in a second, but it definitely started with a more narrow scope.
Okay.
And most successful startups start with a more narrow scope, and then you realize as you start building your product, as you start seeing the opportunity, that a bigger opportunity is unfolding that was in the back of your mind, but wasn't fully your driving beacon at the very beginning. And so in the beginning for Mike, it was actually called Policy Mike, and it was more narrowly focused on issues around politics, policy, and social issues. And so in the beginning, we were very focused on creating a platform that would spark meaningful, important conversations among young people about really sort of what we thought to be substantive issues around politics. And then it broadened out into a much bigger idea around news as we saw that opportunity open up, and we actually thought it was possible. But actually, I'll take a step back. So Jake and I actually played in a jazz band together in high school. So we go way back. And he was the creative mind of our jazz band. He wrote all the music, and I was kind of the business operations sales guy that booked the gigs and marketed the band. So that was our split back then, and it's pretty funny. It's still our split today.
You were the CEO of the band, basically.
I was the CEO, and he was the creative genius. So we go way back to high school, and so fast forward now to 2010. Jake had just moved back from the Middle East. He was working for the Carnegie Endowment in Lebanon. I was working at Goldman, and we were having lunch, and essentially had this idea that young people care a lot more about substantive issues than most people realize. We saw in the 2008 Obama elections, we saw, and you still see it today through Occupy Wall Street, the Arab Spring, Ferguson, these social issues drive conversation that is really ongoing amongst our generation. And people are very, very tuned into these things. So we felt that undercurrent. And at the same time, we didn't see legacy media companies, the CNNs, the New York Times, is successfully pivoting to reach and speak to people like us. So we saw those two things, and we actually launched Policy Mike while we both had other jobs as a sort of small blog to crowdsource ideas from young people that we knew that we thought were smart. Let's see where this goes. So that was the very initial idea. It was not a business. It was something we were focused on as doing in terms of passion. Then December 2010 rolls around. So we launched this thing in November 2010. December 2010 rolls around, and we had a writer in Tunisia. And he sends us an email at 2 a.m. one night. And I was up because I was working at Goldman and I was still at my desk. And so I called Jake, and I'm like, Jake, you get this email? He's like, yeah, this is crazy. And we had this writer in Tunisia who was essentially live blogging the revolution. And he's like, hey guys, shit's going down. This is crazy. This is a much bigger thing than anybody realized. Like, the streets are going crazy. You know, they're rioting, they're breaking buildings. Like, this is like, there's a full on revolution here. Like, post my stuff as fast as possible. So we stayed up all night posting this guy, David Dietz, his articles from Tunisia as this unfolded. And the story was not being covered by CNN yet. It was not being covered by Reuters. You know, nobody really had correspondence in Tunis. It wasn't a media hotspot. And so we ended up being one of the first on this. It didn't get a ton of traffic because we weren't set up for it and we didn't have the distribution. But what we realized was that media was really fundamentally changing at a very core level, and that news was evolving into something very, very different than it used to be, and that this was super fun. And this was like addictive. And we wanted to be in the middle of this, and we wanted to see, you know, where this would play out. And so it was that, like, I remember the next day we were like, you know, we need to be doing this all the time. And so that's when we decided we were going to quit our jobs. And by March of 2011, we had, you know, both left our jobs, and it was time to start Policy Mike. And so that was that's how we got hooked. And then, you know, a bunch of things changed in our favor in the broader industry that set it up so that, like, now we actually have a legitimate chance of building a brand that's going to become as trusted as CNN. But in the beginning, we didn't really know if that was possible.
Interesting. And so do you still, like, sort of live distribute news as it sort of breaks, like in conjunction sort of with how Twitter would be doing it now, or people on Twitter?
So no, we don't.
Okay.
Because
in 2010, it sounds like kind of that was, but now Twitter kind of gets used for that, right?
Yeah. Twitter owns breaking news.
Right.
And so, and real time, and Twitter is an amazing platform for real time. And so that's actually been a really big evolution for us in terms of how we think about it is, you know, CNN's job is not really breaking news anymore. News gets broken on Twitter. And if you're 25 years old with a smartphone, you see news through a push notification on one of the, you know, 5 news apps you have on your phone, or you see news on Twitter, or you see news on Facebook. You don't really need a news company giving you headlines anymore because you live in a world of headlines. If you're 25, what you need is perspective that you can trust. You need a deeper look at what's actually happening. You want to think about what the future looks like. You want to engage at a layer deeper. And that's really the role of media companies today, is to provide depth, not headlines. And so that's where Mike, you know, that's where I think CNN and New York Times are eventually going to go, but that's where Mike is right now. We want to be real time, we want to be current, but we know people are getting the breaking news facts from platforms. They need a trusted media company to go a level deeper.
Yeah, that's cool. Because as you were saying it just with 2010, I was like, well, it was different back then, right? So, and you've seen that evolution and had to obviously sort of adapt your business to it, I guess, in that way.
Yeah, exactly.
So your company is growing fast, like really fast, from 15 to 50, as you said, to 65. And obviously technology is changing around you. The way people are consuming the news and information is changing just faster than, I mean, we can even take guesses at it, but we don't know where it's always going to go. So how do you guys in your company now, you and your co-founder, decide on a direction Mike needs to head? Whether it's a new project or a new feature with the service or a new way of, I don't know, like gathering or like the information. How is it that you decide? Like, it's not like you're 3 people anymore where it's, oh, we'll just sit at a table and like, okay, let's do it. There's probably a big process. There's probably processes in everything to get things changed and adapt new people into these new processes. So I'm interested to know, though, with the growth going on and obviously in such a crazy, fast, ever-changing market, how do you guys decide where it is you should head next or now?
Yeah, that's really probably my second most important job after making sure we don't run out of money is figuring out what we do next. And so the way, at a big picture, you know, I'll give you the big picture and then the actual process. At a big picture, we sort of observe what's happening in the world, we think about where it's going, and then we base strategies off of that. So, if we were talking right now about what's happening in the media landscape, I would say there's probably 4 trends that Mike is very interested in. So one is essentially the line between news and video is blurring really fast. So both on the consumption side and the creation side. So on the consumption side, you used to read your print newspaper and watch your TV news, and they were different mediums provided by different brands. Now, as a user, you're watching video in Facebook and reading articles in Facebook. You're watching video in Snapchat and reading articles in Snapchat. You're reading and watching things on your laptop, on your computer, and your smart TVs. So people are reading and watching on the same platforms and through the same platforms and on the same devices. And that's really, really interesting as a media company, where you used to be segregated to one medium. Now you have access to essentially all of them through the platforms that you normally distribute content. So that's one big trend that's super, super interesting. And that's only accelerating. I think a second big trend that we're interested in is essentially trust and brands are becoming more important. So, 5 years ago, when Google was the only game in town in terms of distributing content, it didn't really matter what your URL was. It only mattered if you got indexed highly on Google. Today, you have actually real competition in social networking. You have Facebook, Twitter, Snapchat. You have all these messaging platforms growing up really quickly. And all of these platforms, these social media platforms, they're really content discovery. They're communication and content discovery networks. And they need, the way Twitter beats Facebook is by having better content than Facebook for users. That's a big component. And so they're all looking to have the best content on their platform and essentially creating competition for good media and good media brands. And that just didn't exist 3 years ago. And as media brands become more important, it's going to be a big shift. It hasn't really existed on digital in a big way. And with Netflix and Hulu and Roku, you're even going to start seeing users pay for content on demand, which is going to add a whole new layer of quality content is rising. So those are 2 of the big trends. I guess I'll give you the other 2 very quickly. 3 is advertisers need to reach millennials. That's obvious, but essentially a lot of brands, if they don't reach millennials now, are going to go under. And then 4, there's going to be new winners in the space, and they're going to be decided in the next couple of years. So those are 4 of the trends we're thinking about. In terms of process, very quickly, essentially the way we think about it is, okay, is this issue that we're thinking about important? And is it urgent? So an example would be video. Is video important? Yes, because it aligns with a big trend. Is it urgent? I don't know. Do we think if we don't do it today that we're going to lose? That's how we think about priorities at Mike. Is it important and is it urgent? If it's both, let's do it right now. If it's important but not urgent, we'll do it later. If it's urgent but not important, we'll never do it. And so that's sort of our framework at a high level. And then we really rely on the VPs to set roadmaps every quarter.
Wow. Excellent, man. Okay, we're going to end off on something that I'm calling the entrepreneurial gap, which is the fact that somebody like you, Chris, you are moving at such a fast pace. Your business is growing. Where you are is moving so fast. And you've come a long ways to me, obviously, not to you, but from the outside, it looks like a relatively short period of time. But we're always looking forward, always 3 months, 6 months, a year, 5 years down the road. What is it going to be? And we don't often stop right now and look back at what we've come through, what we've come over and around and across to get to where we are and maybe appreciate that. So could you just stop and think of graduating from school to where you are now in a very short period of time? Tell me how you feel about where you've gotten to, and also tell me where it is that you want to go.
Yeah, so I feel like I've had an incredible opportunity to learn at a super high velocity. And that's been a few big things. One is I've been super lucky to have an amazing group of advisors who are really honest with me and who really pushed me to be better. And this job would be impossible without those people. So that's one. Two, the way we talk about it at Mike is like, personally, you can be between, in terms of how hard you're working, how hard the problems you're working on, you could be in your comfort zone or you can be in your panic zone. In your comfort zone, you're sort of going with the flow, you're not learning too much. In the panic zone, you're hyper stressed out and you're probably too stressed to actually do good work. Where we like being is somewhere between comfort and panic, where you're stretched, but you're not too stressed out to actually learn anything. I think about keeping myself in that stretch zone. So I'm pushing myself hard, but I'm not in panic mode. And that's where I find like I learn the most. And I definitely feel I've been alternating between panicked and stretched for the last 4 years at Mike and learning a ton. So that's been really special. Over the next, 5 years, I really want to learn how to build a sustainable, high quality company, culture, and organization. I think, it's one thing to build a startup that grows fast. It's another to build a company that lasts a long time and evolves. And that's, something I'm learning about how to do. And hopefully I'm going to figure out how to do, but that's very different than what I've been doing. And that's really that's the vision for Mike. That's a vision for me.
Excellent. The stretch zone between comfort and panic that's awesome. I love it. It's such a great way to look at it. And it makes so much sense when you say it. So this has been a lot of fun, Chris, and we've got to talk about you and your business in passing. Can you just specifically tell the listener where they can go find out more about you, Chris, and then also about your business?
Definitely. So you can find out about our business, mic.com, mike.com, or our mobile app, Mike Check. And you can find me at Twitter at C Altchek, and you can email me anytime at chris@mike.com.
That's awesome. I will post all that to the show notes so they're easy for everyone to find. But definitely check out mike.com because it's amazing what you guys are doing. And Chris, just thank you so much. Please keep doing what you're doing because it is amazing to watch. And I think you guys are on to some really, really big things. And it's great to see. So thank you so much for stopping by.
I really appreciate the time, John.
My pleasure.
Bye.
Today's episode of Hack the Entrepreneur is brought to you by Studio Press Sites, a proven solution that gives you the ease of an all-in-one website builder with the flexible power of WordPress. It's perfect for bloggers, podcasters, and affiliate marketers, as well as those selling physical products, digital downloads, and membership programs. Check out all of the innovative features today at studiopress.com/hack. And as a Hack the Entrepreneur listener, you'll get your very first month absolutely free. That's studiopress.com/hack. Chris, thank you so much for that conversation. Wow. When they tell you that if you are the smartest person in a room, that you're in the wrong room. Well, we weren't literally in the room together, but if I was in a room with Chris, and the way I felt in that conversation was I was definitely in the right room because the guy, wow. I guess Harvard should have tipped me off, and now building Mike. It's really, really, really impressive. So I have this giant list of possible hacks. I do. You probably do too. Because Chris said a lot of things. He's a smart person building what's going to be, and already kind of is, but it's going to be a massive media company. It's not a small thing to start, and he's just going for it, and I love it. But he said so many smart things. Yet there was this one thing. It kind of stuck with me. One thing. Did you get it? Did you hear it? Let's do it. Let's find the hack.
In terms of how hard you're working, how hard the problems you're working on, you could be in your comfort zone or you can be in your panic zone. In your comfort zone, you're sort of going with the flow, you're not learning too much. In the panic zone, you're hyper stressed out and you're probably too stressed to actually do good work. Where we like being is somewhere between comfort and panic, where you're stretched, but you're not too stressed out to actually learn anything.
And that's the hack. Chris, this is good. Somewhere you need to be is between your comfort zone and your panic zone. And I love how he wants his people and himself to be stretched. So you're not just laid back in the comfort zone, you're stretched, but you're not running around like a chicken with your head cut off. And so you're so stressed that you're not learning anything, you're not growing, and you're not really putting your full thought into it. That's beautiful. Stretched, but not stressed. And it's so true because you don't want to get lackadaisical. You don't want to. And yet you see people that they're so busy that they really don't accomplish anything of any value. And I have never heard it put more eloquently than you just put it, Chris. And I thank you so much for that. All right, guys, this has been a lot of fun. I thank you so much for taking the time again to stop by and listen. You have to know at this point how much it means to me. It really, really, truly does. And if you haven't, check out the website, HackTheEntrepreneur.com. You're going to see my pretty face up there. Beside that is a place to put in your email. Please drop your email in there. I can't believe there's people listening and they haven't done this yet. I would love to be able to write you an email every Sunday afternoon, and it would mean a lot to me. And just like it means a lot to me that you're out there listening. This has been a lot of fun. I thank you. And please, until next time, keep hacking the entrepreneur.